We all know somebody who's been accused of a crime. But that's not the point of this video today. This point is to prove another point. That Americans, the people who value freedom the most, Texans, us as proud Texans who value our freedom, are losing it more and more and more because we seem to all believe that a bigger government is the answer. But we complain that smaller government is what we need. So I live here in Texas, and here in Texas, the Texas Penal Code contains most criminal law, okay? And it has other statutes in it as well, but things like the Transportation Code, the Health and Safety Code, Alcoholic Beverage Code, Business and Commerce Code, all of these different codes. You see, a criminal offense doesn't necessarily have to be breaking a law created by the legislative branch. Laws can be broken by people who are well-intentioned, who they go about their normal everyday life in a place like Texas or anywhere else, and they don't intend to hurt anyone. They just want to live free, happy, peaceful lives. But because an agency of some sort, the Alcoholic Beverage Commission, the Department of Transportation, the county judge, the city council, something like this, you know, the permitting departments at your local city, they've created laws. And they're not necessarily given the power to do so because they're not elected officials. You see, this whole thing gets pretty confusing. And I'm no lawyer, but I want to go into this with you and discuss the real implications about the law in America. Lavrentiy Beria. He was the head of Joseph Stalin's secret police. Now, Stalin was a terrorist, he was a dictator, he was a communist, he had all sorts of things, right? That's what they teach us here in the West. But Lavrentiy Beria said, "Show me the man, I'll show you the crime." That's kind of where we're at in America today. If you show me a person, I'll find a crime that person has committed. Now, when Beria said this, and I'll say this again, show me the man, I'll show you the crime. When he made this very boasting, this very boisterous claim, he was serving as the deputy premier of Russia from 1941 all the way until, I think, Stalin's death in 1953. He oversaw the expansions of gulags and the other secret detention sites within Russia. People there became political prisoners, and not just because they dissented or disagreed with the government, but because they were violating social ordinances and laws, and society didn't like what they had to say. Now, Beria targeted the man first in this because he wanted to set the precedence that if you find me someone, find me a person, I will find you a law. I will fabricate it. I will apply any law to the most innocent human being. Now, of course, in the United States, by contrast, right, the U.S. Constitution says that we're different. The United States Constitution says that we're all entitled to innocence until proven guilty. It doesn't happen that way. You and I both know that it doesn't happen that way, especially in places like Texas, where our leadership shows such a deep reverence for law, but they have no respect for law. Think about that. You see, in the United States, the Constitution, it has several amendments that are set forth to protect people. And there was a very popular Supreme Court case back in 1895. It was Coffin versus U.S. And it challenged the 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendments of the Constitution that guarantee us the right to innocence, the right to a fair trial, the right to being able to access the legal system as it is. But I want to tell you something interesting about this. Now, unlike Baraya's paradigm that he was involved with, U.S. prosecutors, they say that they start with a discovery process. It really doesn't. It starts with an accusation. Somebody makes a claim. Unlegally trained police officers or agents of the court come to your house. They can detain you. They can try to ascertain what they believe is fact. And you can be detained, and you could have a lot of problems in your life off of a simple accusation, an assumption, if you will. And that's the problem with this. You see, my argument to this is the President of the United States wants protections from a crime, from people making accusations, from people lying about him and his family and his political friends. But you and I don't get that same benefit. You and I don't get the same luxury that this man is claiming is protected to him under the Constitution. That, my friends, is what I have an issue with. You see, James Madison and the other framers of the Constitution, they wanted to believe that the courts and the legal system were made available to all men, not just the most elite of society. All too often, the courts and the legal process are missed. You and I, average Americans, going on about our daily life with no intent to hurt anyone, face corrupt legal system, taking pleas when you shouldn't have to give a plea, facing criminal accusations and being found guilty in the court of public opinion. Or, people lose their jobs every single day. They lose their homes. They lose their lives simply because of an accusation. They say that we're only letting violent offenders out, and all this and that, that we need bail and all this and that, bail reform. The truth of the matter is, Americans don't want freedom. Americans seem to want laws because we vote for political parties, Republicans and Democrats, that all they do is create more laws. I want to tell you something that in 1900, the U.S. Criminal Code could fill up maybe one volume of paper, less than a few thousand pages. Now, it fills up a whole wall. Every single year, this code gets bigger and bigger. Agencies create laws. They create ordinances and things that carry criminal punishment if you violate them. And they're left up to the most untrained individuals. You see, that's what's dangerous with our society. How we become every single day more like the old communist than we do James Madison. But I think that part of this is much deeper than any of us actually realize. Now, you might be wondering why I'm talking about this. It's because I was recently reading the book by Supreme Court Justice, Associate Justice Neil Gorsuch. He's a Trump appointee. He come from a few years ago. And admittedly, when I heard he was a Trump appointee, I had my doubts. And I thought, America is becoming a more corrupt, a more violent, a more misguided society every single day, where we're focused more on not on good government, but just the fact that we're validated, just the fact that our opinions are proven right. I was worried about this, so I went and I started reading a couple of books by Neil Gorsuch. Both of them, actually, that I've read. A Republic, If You Can Keep It, and Overruled. Both of these books opened my eyes to something. That at least one Supreme Court justice has the ability to see beyond politics and favoritism. Now, we're not always going to agree with him. We're always going to think that maybe he's politically swayed because he's a political appointee for a lifetime. But there's a reality to this. Being a justice at the Supreme Court level has got to be very difficult. And I respect that. But maybe what we need is reform at the local level. You see, our judges, our prosecutors, assistant DAs, all these people have way too much power. Show them a man, they'll show you a crime. Every single one of them. And my friends, that's the problem with where we're at today. There's no balance. There's no mercy. There's no understanding. There's no legitimacy to our courts anymore. I do still have my doubts about the Supreme Court. I have my doubts about people like Justice Kavanaugh, who the man just looks corrupt. And you can tell that he's going to be a finger puppet for his party. Now, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know Kavanaugh, and I don't know Gorsuch. But Justice Gorsuch, Associate Justice Gorsuch, at least represents, I think, most of us in the West, because he's from Colorado. He's from our beloved Rocky Mountains. He spent time on the flats. He's been out where most of us have been. He understands. He served on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. And you know, my thought to this is this. He seems, acts, and thinks like a moderate American. But my question is, are we even remotely close to being moderate anymore? You see, we all claim to want less government. But we increasingly give government more and more power. I want you to think about the power that you and I give to our government, from the very top to the very bottom. It's really scary. You know, the total number of criminal laws just here in Texas is very difficult to exactly put a number on. Do you know that nobody can tell you exactly how many criminal laws are in Texas? Nobody. They have no clue. And that's a fact. Because there's literally thousands upon thousands upon thousands of criminal offenses spread across many different legal codes. Remember we talked about that earlier? This complexity has led for calls for judicial and legal reform here in Texas and all around the country, trying to get rid of outdated or obscure or maybe even redundant laws that just go on and on and on and on. And I'm going to tell you about a few of those examples from here in Texas right now. Did you know that there's an inappropriate use of dairy cows? Now, under this law, it's illegal to sell Limburger cheese on Sunday here in Texas. Now, this may sound very bizarre to some of you, but it goes back to our beloved blue laws here in Texas, which were meant to restrict certain activities on Sunday because you're supposed to be going to church and worshiping God and doing all of these things that you're should not be doing or doing according to your own choice in a free country, instead of creating laws that just create more laws. But anyway, although it's unlikely, I want to talk about this Limburger cheese law, right? And although it's highly unlikely that anybody would ever be arrested for selling Limburger cheese on a Sunday in Texas, technically, it remains possible for you to be theoretically arrested and have legal issues faced for selling Limburger cheese on Sunday. Does that law need to go? You know, it's just been in my lifetime that you couldn't buy a mop on Sunday. You couldn't buy a broom on Sunday in Texas. You can't, for the most part, it's difficult to buy a car on Sunday in Texas because of blue laws. These religious laws that tried to restrict moral code. You see, show me a man and I'll show you a criminal. Every single one of us. Now, I'm going to give you one more example. Did you know that it used to be, and in some places it still is, that you need a permit to walk around barefooted? It's true. In some Texas cities, there's local ordinances that permit you to walk around barefooted, but only if you have a permit. Now, could you imagine, you know, they do this, okay? So these ordinances that exist, not walking around barefooted in public, are supposedly health and safety ordinances created by local governments, and that you have to have a permit to be able to do this. Cody Lundeen probably would not be welcome in some places in Texas for multiple reasons, but partly because he walks around barefooted, which I think is really cool. But you could get a fine or you could face minor legal trouble, and if you don't pay the fine, you could end up in one of our jails or a private detention center that's ran for profit. You follow me here? But you see, this is one of the strange laws in Texas that still exists in some places. And if it's ever even enforced, a 10-year-old could get in trouble for running around barefooted. It depends on how literal the idiot enforcing the law wants to take the law. And that's right, I said the idiot enforcing the law. Because a person who is there to enforce it oftentimes struggles with guilt or innocence on the spot about whether or not they're upholding the Constitution, about whether or not they're living right and doing right by their fellow man. Because even the enforcer is a criminal in this society. Going back to Beriah, show me a man, I'll show you a law. I'll show you a criminal. So where are we at in society today? I don't know. I don't know. I wish I had an answer for you. My hope is that the Constitution of this great country will still prevail. My hope is it will make a move to do things right. You see, President Trump said that he was accused falsely, lies were spread about him, he had to endure criminal prosecutions and all of this based on assumptions. If that is true, he's asking for more privilege than you or I. And the framers of the Constitution never intended for one man in America to have more privilege than another, especially the executive or the legislators. That's a republic. And going back to Associate Justice Gorsuch and his book, A Republic, If You Can Keep It. Well, I feel like this is important because it's actually a quote by one of the framers of the Constitution. I think it was Ben Franklin that said, a republic, if you can keep it. As a Westerner, as a Texan, I believe very strongly in a good republic. But what I believe in even more is freedom. I believe that all men, the enforcer, the legislator, the common man, should be held accountable to the same spirit of the law. People often say, well, Matt, you disrespect the law, you disrespect law enforcement, you disrespect the legislative process. I don't. In fact, I respect it very deeply. As somebody who's paid consequences because of the system, as somebody who's been accused under the system, as somebody who's been, quote unquote, railroaded by the system, I respect it. What I don't respect is what people do to abuse it. When one person is administered justice one way, and another person is administered justice in another way, and a person can lose their entire livelihood over a relatively small infraction or crime, that's what I have a problem with. And I have an even bigger problem when a person can lose everything based off an assumption, a presumption of fact. Now, a lot of you will say, well, that's what they did to Trump. Okay. That's what they did to Marianne. That's what they did to Joe. That's what they did to Felix. That's what they did to Billy. That's what they did to Lisa. That's what they did to millions and millions of other Americans. Our president is no different. If he is wrongfully accused and the media and everybody else is throwing lies around about him, welcome to the club, Mr. President. Welcome to America. Overruled in a republic, if you can keep it, by Associate Justice Neil Gorsuch. I highly recommend that every American read these books, Democrat, Republican, or other. It really helps you see more than anything you could imagine. Associate Justice Gorsuch, thank you for writing these books. Thank you for your service. And thank you for your objective view of our beloved Constitution. I'm Matt. This is my vlog. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe.